Hello, I'm Hunsley from Livewire Markets, and this is The Pitch. Joining me today, Anthony Srom, Portfolio Manager for the Asia Pacific Opportunities Fund at Fidelity International. Anthony joined Fidelity's Singapore team in 2006, and he's been a first-hand witness to the remarkable growth of this part of the world. So we're going to see how his time in Asia has evolved alongside his own journey as a professional investor. Anthony, welcome. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Hans.
So I mentioned there in that intro, you've been doing this for a while. What would you say is the most important investing lesson you've learned in that time?
If two stand out, for me it is putting it in context of the background I came from. So before going to Singapore, I was in the Australian investment markets. Developed market, stocks usually go from cheap, neutral to expensive. You learn pretty quickly up in Asia, it goes from ridiculously cheap to neutral to expensive and then ridiculously expensive. So you have some different parameters that you've got to work around, and one of the key differences driving that was very much sentiment up in the region. And for example, a lot of high retail participation in China is something that I'll point to, and you saw that in 2014-15. Maybe another key lesson for me as an investor was just pay attention to what you're maybe seeing more so on the short side. The funds I manage are long only. But again, if you think a company is a buy, but a lot of the free float might be shorted, there's a fair chunk of money going against you. So be a lot more receptive to something like that has been a key learning for me as well.
Okay, so let's take those lessons and speak tangibly if I can. I'm curious, could you share a story about your biggest win since you started at Fidelity, and what was your biggest loss? And I guess what did you learn in each case as well?
Yeah, so I think the biggest win as a portfolio manager was Kweichow Moutai in China. Manufactures a product called Baijiu, which is basically rice wine for all intents and purposes, about 50+% alcohol content. So think of it almost like a Chinese version of whiskey. What happened there? Well, Xi Jinping comes to power in about 2012, starts the corruption crackdown immediately. And given this is a high-end product, a lot of it was consumed by the military and government. It totally fell out of favour with the market. So you're seeing a lot of emails come through your inbox, sell this sector, sell this stock, it's all over, inventory's going to build up. So again, that sentiment that I referenced was very negative. So you work with the analyst, look at the financials, look at the industry. The thing generates very high return on capital, very high margins, very good pricing power through history, growing dividend per share. So what? If the market's worried about the next 12 months, I'm more concerned about the next 3 to 4 years. And that was the opportunity. So the funds invested in it back pre-2013, topped up more in 2014, and still hold it today. So I think if you look at the attribution, it's been the biggest winner for the portfolios. On the flip side, some of your losers are deep scars and get open from time to time, but that's fine. So I'll throw the name out there. It's like Slater and Gordon. We all know what happened with that name. It's pretty familiar to a lot of people in Australia. Again, you probably went for too long against short sellers, and that's what I was referring to earlier as one of the key learnings as an investor up in the region when you're looking at Asia Pac ex-Japan.
A win for rice wine and a loss for lawyers. How about that? So I guess this next question then, you are the perfect person to ask about this. Within Asia and your remit, obviously it's a massive part of the world, what has you most excited as an investor? And is there one thing that's maybe keeping you up at night?
I think in terms of what's the most interesting, I think the market is dangerous at the moment up in Asia, Pac ex-Japan, so it's hard to get excited. But in terms of level of interest, where are the pockets of neglect that you see up there? China is obviously one of them, but also the ASEAN region I think is quite neglected, particularly countries like the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia. So you've got some ideas in those markets that you're working on, executed on one of them at this particular point in time. And given the portfolios that I manage are relatively concentrated in nature, you don't need a lot of ideas. I'm just looking for the best ideas. So that's something that's quite of interest to me. But in terms of what you lose sleep over at night, it's more what occupies most of your thought process at the moment, and that would be AI, which we've seen really take off in the last 12 months, and particularly in this region, Taiwan, being a huge beneficiary of that as a market. And the other interesting country that's challenging your thinking is India. It just keeps going up and going up and going up, but I think the risks at the margin are also going up. So, it's an unpalatable risk-reward payoff profile in my perspective, but the market doesn't care at this particular point in time. So when you look at it, both countries now I think would be, if you look at them, number 2 and number 3, weighted in the region, so they're quite significant now.
Yeah, so well, you talk about kind of like that Asian bent on AI, you talk about India. Is that the question you get asked most these days from investors and clients when you talk to them?
I think it's a little bit different. I think when you go outside the region, so to Europe or even here, I think a lot of questions are more macro and geopolitical in nature. For example, China versus Taiwan. So the questioning is slightly different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in that case then, is there a specific question you get asked most these days, and how do you answer it?
I think it's, what are you doing in the fund?
That
would be kind of, when you meet clients, they want to know what's changed the last 6 to 9 months. Given what we've just discussed in terms of what's happened with markets, it's quite extreme up there. The headline has been okay, maybe up 5-6% year to date, but you've had it torn in different directions, and the level of concentration that's driven that return is very extreme. So people talk kind of Mag 7, Mag 5, whatever it is in the US, point being the concentrated nature of the market there driving returns. But in Asia, it's doubly so. So 2/3 of the market year to date up in Asia has been driven by TSMC and Tencent. Whereas in the US, 2/3 of the market has been driven by the top 5 stocks, Nvidia and the next 4.
Yeah.
So, but no one talks about that. So when you go into meetings, it's, well, what have you done? And what the portfolio has done is, the last 6 to 9 months, sold a lot of technology into the steep rally that we've seen. Why did you do that? How's the portfolio positioned, et cetera, et cetera.
Anthony Srom, thank you very much for explaining that to us. And thank you for joining us for The Pitch. If you enjoyed that interview, you can subscribe to the Livewire Market Index websites, as well as our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.